Key witnesses in the probe into whether Donald Trump and his allies interfered with the 2020 presidential election in Georgia testified today at the Fulton County Courthouse. Prosecutors appear poised to seek indictments imminently. I'm back with Greg Bluestein, Joyce Vance, and Gwen Keys Fleming. This is amazing. Gwen, I'm going to start with you. We'll play some sound from Donald Trump. He's talking here about the fact that, you know, under no circumstances is he going to take any sort of plea deal. And I want you to sort of give us your thoughts on the other side as to how that would even work in a case like this.
Is there any chance you take a plea deal in
Plea
Georgia?
deals. We did nothing wrong. We don't ever take a plea deal.
Yes, sir.
We don't take plea deals. It's a wise guy question. You're just a wise guy. We don't take plea deals because I did nothing wrong. It's called election interference.
I mean, could he even work out a plea deal with Fani Willis at this point? Because it seems unlikely. But what would even be a possibility at this point?
Well, let's first start off with the premise that everybody is innocent until proven guilty. And obviously, everybody is entitled to counsel. So that would be a strategic decision that any of the defendants would have to make with their own counsel after evaluating the facts and evidence that the DA would be poised to present. So it's difficult to even talk about the possibility of a plea deal when we don't yet have the indictment. We need to see who's going to be charged. I know we have speculation. And obviously, we have some window from the foreperson of the special grand jury as to the number of people. But let's see what the charges are. And inevitably, after you get the list of charges and you see who's indicted, there may be some deals back and forth in terms of various defendants agreeing to testify on behalf of the state. I think we've seen some of that with respect to some of the folks that were part of the alleged fake electors scam in terms of them being granted immunity. So all of those questions, I think, are premature. We need to see what that indictment looks like and if there is an actual true bill from the grand jurors. So let's see what happens, whether it's tonight or possibly tomorrow.
Joyce, following up with the same idea. So we don't know. Obviously, Gwen just said we don't know what the indictment could be. We don't know if the indictment's coming down tonight. The idea of sort of talking about, working out a plea deals, it may be slightly premature. But here's the thing. Does the fact that Donald Trump, not just that he was obviously asked the question, but does the fact that he sort of so aggressively says, I don't take deals, I don't take deals, I don't take deals, do you think that indicates anything about how strongly he feels his defense is going to be able to stand up for him in this particular case? Donald Trump is notorious for saying, I don't make deals, and then he cuts deals with people. So is this a sort of just a political move on his behalf, verbal move on his behalf, or could it reflect some real confidence in his legal defense?
Right. So, Jason, I'll answer that by saying I've had plenty of defendants during my career who started out talking just like that, tough talk, didn't do anything wrong, not pleading guilty, and you would wait and they would have the opportunity to read the indictment and to see the evidence, much like Gwen is suggesting, and they would realize at some point that a plea deal was in their best interests. For instance, here, the RICO statute has a 5-year mandatory minimum, but the sentence can be much longer than that. It depends on how the judge evaluates the case at sentencing. It's very likely we'll see some charges against the former president that will potentially carry a lesser sentence. A normal defendant, a typical defendant, might reach the point where they decided it was in their best interests to plead to one of those lesser charges. Donald Trump, I think, is constitutionally incapable of pleading guilty because to do that, he will have to stand in a courtroom and say under oath that he is pleading guilty because he is guilty and for no other reason. I think it's very unlikely that we'll ever see that.
Greg, I want to play you some sound from DA Fani Willis talking about what her experiences have been like during this investigation, and then get your thoughts on sort of what the temperature is on the ground.
All the typical racial slurs that you can imagine. They're very grotesque things. You know, we're on family television. I don't even know that I like to say all of them, but slave horror is one of them. I've probably been called the N-word more times in the last 2.5 years than most 100 people combined.
Yeah, I used to live in Cobb County, and you hear that word a lot more than people would want to believe for the city too busy to hate. Greg, what does that say about the temperature on the ground? And we already talked to Blaine Alexander about security, but, you know, are there worries that people are like running by and chanting this at the courthouse? Is it just letters and emails that be going to DA Willis's office? Like, where's the sort of racial component on the ground, or is it hidden and only directed at the people directly working on the case?
Jason, I think it's the latter, but there's a reason why there's such high security at the courthouse behind me. There's a reason why streets have been closed, why staffers, courtroom staffers have been told starting last week to work virtually, because they are worried about threats and violence. And there's also a reason why even the state capitol is going to be, the gates are going up around the state capitol. Workers at the state Georgia House have been told to work from home. So they're taking precautions because, unfortunately, this isn't new, but I think the intensity has ratcheted up to a new level surrounding the potential indictment of the former president.
And Gwen, I don't want to take you down an unhappy memory lane, but on the scale of sort of abusive language or hostility that you have received in your former job working in DeKalb County, simply being a black woman in a position of authority sometimes makes you the target of this kind of hostility. You know, what's normal? Right? What's a normal level of racial abuse that somebody receives in your position compared to what you think might be happening now, according to DA Willis?
Well, I think it's challenging for any first. But I can say that times have changed significantly. So I was the DA back in 2005. Back then, the attacks that I got were much more subtle, I will have to admit, compared to possibly what DA Willis is going through now. And while we had several high-profile cases, they were not ones where the entire nation was focused on what we were doing. And so I take the DA at her word that she is seeing the level of vitriol that few have experienced. And I really think that that's a sad thing when you have men and women, but particularly those that put themselves forth for elected office or appointed office, but especially elected officials who are out there trying to serve the citizens. She obviously won the confidence and trust of all of the voters, or many of the voters in Fulton County. And all she is trying to do is serve and follow her oath and investigate the facts to be able to arrive at a decision as to whether the law has been broken. And if she finds that there's sufficient evidence to establish that, then go ahead and prosecute to be able to hold that person or those individuals accountable. That is the epitome of service. And she is doing it at great sacrifice to herself and her family and her staff.
Thank you, Greg Bluestein and Gwen Keys Fleming. Joyce Vance is sticking with me.